The platoon leader whirls around, demanding to know if Jongen has lost his mind. Jongen maintains his composure, refraining from answering. Two subordinate platoon leaders glare at him, their anger palpable. As Jongen assesses the situation, he contemplates the possibility of having to confront all three of them simultaneously, despite his injured arms. His confidence, however, remains unshaken, for he believes that dealing with the other two should prove relatively easy compared to the platoon leader who lies unconscious after his powerful kick. He gazes intently at one of them, a sly grin curling upon his lips, his intention clear, to provoke the man into losing his composure. And, to no surprise, his ploy succeeds brilliantly. The targeted individual, his anger ignited, launches a series of furious attacks in his direction, yet each strike finds nothing but air as he deftly evades them with graceful, well-timed movements. In the midst of the chaotic brawl, he seizes the opportune moment, his keen eyes spotting a vulnerability, and lands a swift, calculated kick to the back of his opponent's knee. Pain etches across the man's face as he grimaces, temporarily immobilized. Not missing a beat, our protagonist, Jongen, follows up with a powerful upper kick aimed squarely at his adversary's chin, causing him to tumble to the ground. Defeated, a single decisive kick is all it takes to dispatch the remaining combatant, who crumples to the floor. The onlooking inmates are left utterly dumbfounded, their collective astonishment evident as they witness a solitary figure overpowering three opponents simultaneously. In the aftermath of his triumphant display of physical prowess, Jongen begins to regain his composure. A lingering sense of concern settles in as he contemplates the potential repercussions of his actions. His anxiety escalates when he envisions an employee stumbling upon the chaotic scene. Suddenly, Sunju, one of the fellow inmates, enthusiastically starts cheering his name, and a contagious wave of support ripples through the crowd as others join in. Jongen attempts to hush the enthusiastic spectators, but they prove resolute in their exuberance, rendering his efforts futile. His unease intensifies as he envisions the arrival of a welfare worker amidst the cheering. The prospect of heightened complexity gnaws at his nerves. As if foreseen, his worst fears manifest when an employee enters the scene, inquiring about the raucous disturbance. In an instant, the previously jubilant inmates fall eerily silent. The employee directs his attention toward the fallen platoon leader, brandishing a stern look and a sturdy stick. He points it menacingly toward Jongen, demanding to know if he is the instigator of this chaos. Jongen's mind races as he contemplates his options. Thoughts of subduing the worker briefly flit through his head: kick the stick away, headbutt the intruder, and deliver a swift kick to the abdomen. But rationality prevails. The prison's imposing barriers loom large in his mind, and the impending retaliation from the staff becomes a grim reality. Furthermore, the consequences of injuring a fellow staff member would be dire, making it nearly impossible to safeguard his own well-being. He acknowledges the sobering truth: escalation would only lead to more trouble. With a deep breath, Jongen opts for the path of least resistance. He humbles himself, bending down in front of the worker, and utters an apology, claiming that his actions were a regrettable mistake. In the midst of this tense moment, two brothers, Guang and another figure, make their presence known. Guang inquires pointedly if Jongen is the one responsible for the chaos that has unfolded. Jongen found himself caught in a complex web of circumstances, realizing that the current situation couldn't possibly get any more intricate. In the midst of this, Guang expressed his amazement at the solitary prowess of a man with injured arms, who had taken on three opponents without assistance. Guang admitted that initially he had perceived this individual as a mere complainer, someone who couldn't stand up for himself and merely grumbled about the food. However, as he observed the events unfold, he began to see a different side to him, one that transcended these initial impressions. Intrigued by the unfolding drama, Guang inquired about what had been going through Jongen's mind during this remarkable feat. Subsequently, he challenged the audacity of Jongen's initial belief. With an air of authority, Guang imparted the fundamental rule that platoon members must always heed the directives of their leader, emphasizing that he himself had established this rule, and it was incumbent upon everyone to abide by it without exception. Jongen pondered whether this individual was truly determined to exert control over others' thoughts. Guang fixed a penetrating gaze on Jongen's visage, suggesting that he could still discern the inner workings of his mind behind those eyes, as if there were an unspoken narrative playing out. In a startling turn of events, Guang pronounced a 3-day stint in the punishment room as the consequence of Jongen's actions. Even Sunju, caught off guard by the severity of this punishment, couldn't help but react with shock. Jongen, however, viewed the prospect of spending 3 days in a cell-like punishment room with a degree of nonchalance. To this, Guang erupted into laughter, his amusement echoing off the walls as he cryptically hinted that Jongen's return would see him devoid of any inner musings behind those eyes. Before we continue, take a moment to answer the question of the day. Are gang-related manhwas good in your opinion? Comment down below for a chance to be shouted out. Now back to the recap. In a final plea, Gwang urged Jangen to engage in deep introspection during these 3 days of confinement. He patiently awaited a response, but Jangan maintained a resolute silence, his gaze locked into Gwang's eyes. Sensing Jangan's unspoken resolve, Gwang subtly communicated with his brother through a meaningful glance. Yom strode purposefully towards Jangan, his eyes narrowed with determination as he called out the man's name. But to his dismay, Jangan remained silent and unresponsive. Frustration welled up within Yom, and without further hesitation, he unleashed a swift, punishing punch squarely into Jangan's face, causing his nose to shatter, crimson droplets of blood immediately staining the scene. Breathing heavily, Yeom leaned in closer, his voice filled with intensity as he demanded a response from Jangan. "Answer me, Gwang." Jangan, with his nose still throbbing in pain, managed to stammer out a weak yes twice in quick succession. But Yeom was not yet satisfied. He pressed on, delivering a merciless kick to Jangan's stomach, his voice resolute as he urged, "One more time, and make it loud." Jangan, despite the relentless physical and mental assault, summoned the strength to answer once more with a trembling but resolute yes. The relentless pressure from Yeom pushed Jangan to the brink, but he knew he had to keep his composure. With another blow landing on his back, he was forced to speak louder and clearer, his words a testament to his determination to endure. Gwang, the enforcer of this brutal scenario, was determined to make an example out of Jangan to deter any thoughts of rebellion from others. As they approached the punishment room, Jangan's thoughts raced with apprehension about what awaited him within those grim walls. Sunju, who had been watching the harrowing scene unfold, couldn't help but worry about his friend's fate. Catching Jangan's fleeting smile, Sunju wondered if he had been struck in the head one too many times to find solace in such a situation. As they continued their march towards the punishment room, Sunju couldn't help but ponder the strength of the general manager's fists. A subtle grin crossed his lips as he daydreamed about a future confrontation, convinced that his fists were no less formidable. However, their journey was abruptly interrupted by the welfare employee, who delivered a harsh blow to Jangan's head and barked at him to move faster. Undeterred, Jangan muttered under his breath, vowing to eventually settle the score with this cruel enforcer. Meanwhile, Yom redirected his anger towards the unconscious platoon leader, delivering a sharp and resounding slap across the man's face. The shock jolted the platoon leader awake, and he let out a pained scream, only to fall silent as he found himself face to face with Yeom's unwavering gaze. With a tone of authority, Yeom instructed the dazed platoon leader to accompany him, and with a nod to the other workers, ordered them to return to their tasks, reminding them that their break time had come to an end. Outside, Gwang wasted no time in delivering a harsh assessment to the platoon leader, expressing his doubt about the man's suitability for a leadership role. He responds with unwavering determination, vehemently denying the allegations and asserting his potential as a leader. Gwang, however, doesn't let up, and queries how he can make such a claim when he recently suffered a defeat at the hands of an opponent who couldn't even use their arms. In a tense moment, Gwang seizes the opportunity to confront him further, gripping his insignia and inquiring how he can inspire confidence in his leadership when perceived as physically feeble. However, Gwang is unyielding, prodding him further about his willingness to assert his superiority in a real, fair fight. He goes so far as to issue a direct challenge, urging him to strike right then and there. Panic washes over the platoon leader as he grapples with the daunting prospect of engaging in physical combat. Gwang's persistence does not waver as he continues to emphasize the consequences of the platoon leader's humiliating knockout in front of his subordinates. To drive home the point, he reveals that he has already dispatched Jangan to endure a grueling 3-day stint in the punishment cell. The shock of this revelation rattles even him. With a sly smile, Gwang hints at the forthcoming showdown, suggesting that it will occur when Jangan emerges from the punishment cell, mentally and physically drained, making him an easy target. Finally comprehending the purpose behind this cruel setup, the platoon leader is filled with a newfound resolve. Gwang offers an encouraging pat on his shoulder and inquires if he is prepared to face this challenge head-on. The platoon leader, now resolute, firmly affirms his readiness. The stage is set as Jangan is escorted to a subterranean chamber, a colossal cell awaiting their fateful encounter. He enters the room, expecting to find solitary confinement as his punishment, but instead, he's greeted by a surprising sight, a series of small chambers. His curiosity piqued, he wonders why there aren't any isolated rooms in the basement as he had anticipated. His confusion intensifies when a man abruptly opens one of these chambers and gestures for him to enter. To his shock, He realizes that what he's been led into is not a room at all, but rather a cramped locker, barely large enough for a person to fit. He can't help but wonder if this is how they punish innocent individuals, locking them away in such a confined space. The employee's impatient voice pierces the air as he urges him to hurry, waving a threatening stick in his direction, as if to emphasize the consequences of disobedience. With great difficulty, he squeezes himself into the cramped locker. Standing straight is out of the question. He's forced to hunch over. As the door is sealed shut, darkness engulfs him. He can't help but draw parallels to his military training, where he had learned about various forms of torture employed by captors. One such torture method was chamber torture, where the victim couldn't sit or lie down, making sleep impossible in such an uncomfortable position. Eating, drinking, and even relieving oneself were luxuries denied to the unfortunate captive who had to endure this torment for extended periods. He ponders the use of such cruelty on ordinary people, perplexed by how it could be justified. Yet, his immediate concern is the daunting prospect of spending 3 long days in this unbearable confinement. This night marks his first in this dreadful torture chamber, but it's his 5th night in this welfare center overall. The 6th day begins as sunlight gradually seeps through, casting its beauty outside. Unbeknownst to him, a full day has passed since he was locked in that punishing cell. Completely cut off from the outside world, he has lost all sense of time and events occurring beyond his prison. He wonders if a day has already slipped away, his exhaustion making it impossible to differentiate between brief moments of rest and wakefulness. Above all else, a gnawing hunger consumes him. His tongue incessantly utters a single word: food. On the opposing side of the scenario, within the confines of the 3rd platoon hall, a distressing scene unfolds as Sunju finds himself at the mercy of the platoon leader's aggression. The atmosphere in the room is charged with fear and trepidation, as everyone present witnesses Sunju's torment. His cries of agony pierce the air, revealing the unfamiliarity of such brutality to him. The platoon leader, his voice thundering with anger, accuses Sunju of aligning himself with Jangan while he was unconscious. He cruelly taunts Sunju, asking him how he enjoys the repercussions of his alliance. Sunju, desperately attempting to utter a response, is silenced by a sharp kick to his leg from the platoon leader. Amidst this harrowing scene, Your Excellency intervenes, attempting to shame the others who had been involved in the rebellious scheme. However, a veil of feigned ignorance shrouds the faces of those present as they distance themselves from any knowledge of the unfolding events. The platoon leader's aggression escalates as he grabs Sunju by the hair, vowing to demonstrate the consequences faced by those who dare defy their leader. With brutal force, he strikes Sunju's face with his knee, hurling him to the unforgiving floor. The relentless onslaught continues as the platoon leader pummels Sunju with his foot. In the midst of this savage display, Your Excellency steps forward, appealing for an end to this brutality and questioning the platoon leader's motives. In response, the platoon leader directs his anger towards Your Excellency, delivering a kick that sends him tumbling onto Sunju. The platoon leader and his 2 loyal underlings persistently assault Sunju and Your Excellency, labeling them as traitors. They continue their relentless barrage, their kicks a symbol of their contempt. Meanwhile, in a completely different setting, Injai is engaged in a covert operation within the director's office, discreetly packing stacks of money into shoeboxes. This currency, concealed within the boxes, is intended as a bribe for government workers. Methodically, Injai assembles 3 bags, ensuring that the funds are indistinguishable from each other, poised to be distributed in an orderly fashion. Injai's associate, Guang, extends an invitation to Yeom to accompany him on this mission. Yeom accepts, his curiosity piqued. Guang's gaze falls upon a conspicuously large box of money on the floor, prompting him to inquire about its purpose. His father, in a hushed tone, instructs him to leave that particular box untouched, as it is destined for someone of extraordinary significance. Puzzled by the substantial amount within this box, Yeom seeks an explanation from Injai. In response, Injai reveals that the recipient of this box is not just an ordinary government employee. He holds the key to the country's governance. Armed with this knowledge, Guang and Yeom set out to deliver these bribes to the government employees. During their journey, Yeom inquires about the nature of these individuals' assistance and the rewards they receive in return. Guang enlightens him, citing an example of a welfare department worker at Daesan City Hall who aids them in securing government funds. Guang offers the worker a gift bag, to which the worker expresses a desire to do more for their cause. Guang reassures him that his continued hard work is all that is required. Next, Guang embarks on a journey to the vibrant seaside of the city, where he has a rendezvous with the esteemed chief of the Daesan police station. As their meeting unfolds, the chief's discerning eye falls upon a shoebox, prompting him to remark appreciatively about the elegant and substantial nature of the footwear. In a gesture of deference, Guang nods his head respectfully and extols the virtues of the station's manager, who tirelessly crisscrosses the nation to serve its citizens. He encourages the chief to continue his noble mission while clad in these remarkable shoes. Guang's journey leads him to a chance encounter with an individual on a desolate road to whom he imparts a thoughtful gift. This recipient happens to be the prosecutor representing the Daisen district, and he handles the offered bag with a measured touch, as though assessing its contents by weight. In response to Guang's coded message, the prosecutor reveals a penchant for apples, but is willing to accept pears this time around. Guang pledges to provide him with the finest apples when they come into season. As the prosecutor departs, Guang softly mutters that he need not be overly selective and should accept whatever is offered to him. He confides in Yeom, detailing how these individuals quash any attempts by whistleblowers to unveil the truth about the welfare center to the general public. Guang then extends a sum of money to Yeom, eliciting surprise from his companion. Yeom inquires if this money is a portion of the bribe funds, to which Guang responds by questioning how one can effectively bribe someone without offering something in return for their troubles. He reveals that he himself had discreetly accepted bribes in the past without arousing suspicion. This is why he has brought Yeom into this fold, emphasizing the importance of brothers sharing life's blessings. Grateful for Guang's support, Yeom expresses his heartfelt thanks. Subsequently, as they sit together in their car, Guang suggests a well-deserved treat for their commendable efforts. They make their way to a local restaurant and indulge in a delectable feast of cooked meat. Guang, a resourceful individual, crafted a humble yet delectable morsel by delicately placing a tender piece of meat alongside fragrant herbs onto a lattice leaf. With a sense of camaraderie, he extended his hands, offering this homemade creation to Yeom. He observed Yeom savor each bite with satisfaction and complimented his impeccable eating manners. These shared culinary moments were cherished by both of them. Amidst this pleasant interlude, Guang paused mid-bite as Yeom summoned his attention. Yeom inquired earnestly about Guang's intentions regarding a potential confrontation between the platoon leader and Zhanggan once he was released from confinement. Guang, intrigued by the question, sought to understand Yeom's perspective. He pondered whether an individual enduring 3 days in the punishment room could realistically triumph in such a duel. Yeom conceded that, under normal circumstances, victory would be an insurmountable challenge. Yet he recounted how Zhanggan had already bested 3 adversaries with broken arms, offering a glimmer of hope. Tentatively, Yeom ventured to express his belief that perhaps, Guang interjected, emphasizing the crucial perhaps. He probed Yeom's thoughts on whether Zhanggan's newfound strength would translate into utility for their cause. Yeom, though acknowledging this point, questioned how Guang intended to sway someone who could easily overpower their platoon leader. Guang conceded that immediate influence was improbable. However, he held firm in his belief that, through the ordeal of the punishment room, they could break Zhanggan's spirit and mold him into an obedient follower. 2 arduous days had elapsed since Zhanggan's confinement, during which sleep had eluded him entirely. His visage bore the weight of a century's worth of sorrow, resembling that of a lost soldier. Hunger gnawed at his insides, and his parched mouth conjured images of every conceivable dish. He clung to these culinary reveries as a lifeline, a reason to endure the relentless ordeal. But there was another, perhaps even more compelling motivation: Missiona. In the darkest moments of his confinement, Zhanggan's mind conjured the radiant and smiling countenance of Missiona. He recalled his promise to take her out for a meal, and this vision became his anchor. He visualized the scene where he would summon the courage to invite her to dinner, and in his imagination, she would gleefully accept. When she inquired about their meal choice, he would reply with heartfelt sincerity, declaring that the food mattered little as long as he had the privilege of her company. These thoughts were his whispered solace as he fought to endure. As another agonizing night descended upon this hellish place, the 3rd day of Zhanggan's confinement came to a close. When the lock finally released its grip, he collapsed to the unforgiving floor, his body betraying his exhaustion. Struggling to lift his head, he met Guang's gaze, who wore a sardonic smirk, deeming Zhanggan's defeated countenance a sight to savor. Guang, the stern overseer, issues a commanding order for the others to relocate Zhanggan from his current spot. Zhanggan, lying weak and drained on the cold, unforgiving floor, is utterly incapable of movement due to his severe energy depletion. Over by the prison bars, Sunju and his distinguished companions stand watchfully. They swiftly approach Zhanggan, extending their helping hands to assist him in getting back on his unsteady feet. Sunju, his gaze filled with concern, remarks upon Zhanggan's visibly deteriorating condition. He urges that they expedite his transfer elsewhere for his own well-being. Together, they support Zhanggan as he struggles to walk, trailing behind Guang as they navigate the desolate surroundings. Zhanggan, casting a weary glance at Sunju's face, inquires about his well-being and the cause of the evident marks on his visage. Sunju proceeds to recount the unfortunate events of that day, explaining how he had suffered a thrashing from the platoon leader for taking his side. Furthermore, His Excellency had also faced retribution for daring to speak up in Sunju's defense. Despite the hardships endured, Sunju musters a faint smile when Jongan looks his way, evoking a sense of sympathy from his fellow inmate. With hunger gnawing at his stomach, Jongan queries Sunju about their destination, expressing his longing for sustenance. Sunju's response, however, dashes his hopes, revealing that their immediate priority is not to secure a meal. As their fellow inmates huddle together on the ground, an atmosphere of fear grips them all, contrasting with the platoon leader's composed demeanor, poised for an impending confrontation. Jangan, visibly weakened and distressed, takes note of his surroundings and concludes that his captors intend to force him into combat with the patio commander upon his release from the punishment chamber. The platoon leader, harboring vivid recollections of Guang's instructions from the past, recognizes the significance of this moment. He understands the necessity of preserving his reputation, especially after suffering a public humiliation when he was knocked down. Confident in his abilities, the platoon leader believes that he already holds the upper hand in this forthcoming battle. He anticipates that all he needs to do is defeat Jongan while feigning an air of nonchalance. Guang, on the other hand, derives amusement from the unfolding scenario, likening it to the spectacle of a gladiator duel. However, Yom, standing nearby, refrains from sharing in the laughter. Instead, he somberly observes Jongan's pitiable condition and remarks that, despite any pretense of a duel, the circumstances make it appear more like an execution. Nevertheless, he acknowledges the morbid curiosity that accompanies the impending spectacle. Guang, with an air of authority, issues the long-awaited command for the commencement of the impending battle. Both combatants find themselves thrust into the limelight, standing face to face, their fates hanging in the balance. The referee, a poised and impartial figure in the center, implores them to initiate the showdown upon his signal. Jangan, in the heat of the moment, contemplates the allure of a brief respite. His gaze drifts towards his platoon leader, who exchanges a meaningful glance with their comrades, conveying an unspoken message. Finally, the moment arrives as the referee brandishes the green flag, granting the signal for the epic confrontation to begin. In a calculated show of bravado, the platoon leader unleashes a thunderous, intimidating scream aimed squarely at Jangan. Yet, amid the raucous cheers and charged atmosphere, Jangan's mind drifts back to a clandestine meeting with his confidants the day before. In a hushed conversation, he had disclosed his intention to face Jangan the moment he emerged from confinement. Doubt lingers in his thoughts, for all too well, Jangan's reputation precedes him as the masterful wielder of his powerful legs. Still, the resolve to secure a victory in this looming duel remains paramount. A trusted friend had offered a clandestine strategy: exploit Jangan's vulnerability, his injured arms, by targeting them with a barrage of kicks as the battle began. While the platoon leader acknowledged the tactic's deceptive nature, he recognized its potential to secure a triumph. As the arena crackles with anticipation, he propels himself forward, letting out a primal scream that reverberates through the crowd. Meanwhile, Jongan remains stationary, seemingly resigned to the inevitable outcome. He hopes the confrontation will swiftly reach its conclusion, harboring no desire to fight back. But then, a realization seizes him. His vulnerable arms must be shielded at all costs. Consequently, when the platoon leader aims a precise kick at his weakened limbs, Jongan evades with a fluid, backward bend. The platoon leader's astonishment is palpable, his expectations shattered. In a swift, retaliatory twist, Jangan whirls around and launches a fierce back kick, landing it squarely in his opponent's abdomen. Agonizing screams rend the air, and the platoon leader's visage contorts in sheer pain, his face flushing crimson. Onlooker Yeom watches in amazement, left to ponder whether Jongan might possess an undisclosed mastery of martial arts. Guang, momentarily forgetting himself, allows his jaw to hang agape as a chuckle, which had threatened to surface earlier, promptly dissipates. Streams of water gush from the platoon leader's eyes and mouth, a manifestation of both physical anguish and bewildering disbelief. The platoon leader's mind races with perplexing thoughts. Did Jangan truly emerge from the punitive confines just prior to this encounter? How could he wield such astonishing strength and agility? The enigma of Jangan's true abilities deepens with each passing moment. Jangan's gaze fixates upon the bruised countenances of Sunju and His Excellency, who had endured a merciless thrashing merely for expressing their support on that fateful day. The sight of their battered faces fuels an ever-mounting anger within him, kindling the ember of revenge in his heart. His eyes then turn towards the platoon leader, a man who seems to possess a premonition of the impending ordeal. With an unyielding determination, Jangan unleashes a forceful kick squarely to the platoon leader's visage, shattering his nose and initiating a profuse flow of crimson. The single devastating blow sends the platoon leader tumbling to the ground, leaving onlookers in stunned silence. Not a single eyelid dares to flutter, and the expressions etched upon every face bear witness to the profound shock that has enveloped them. Unbridled fury still coursing through his veins, Jangan relentlessly pummels his fallen adversary with successive kicks to the face. The platoon leader's comrades, once filled with terror, now gaze in horror at the gruesome spectacle unfolding before them. Amidst the chaos, Sunju's enthusiasm reignites, and he resumes his spirited cheers, while His Excellency, his faith unwavering, voices his enduring support. Meanwhile, the platoon leader appears to teeter on the brink of consciousness, foam oozing from his battered features. Drawing closer to Guang, Jangan inquires if his insatiable thirst for satisfaction has been quenched. In response, Guang, with a wry grin, acknowledges Jangan's peculiar sense of humor and expresses complete contentment. As Jangan begins to articulate his intentions, his eyes suddenly shut of their own accord, and he crumples to the ground, prompting the referee to rush to his side in concern. Guang, perplexed and anxious, seeks answers about the sudden turn of events that have befallen his once boisterous comrade. The referee glanced at his peaceful visage and casually remarked, "He seems to be in the middle of a nap." Guang, a sly grin stretching across his face, quipped, "This fellow is truly entertaining, and I've hatched an amusing plan for him." Jangan had been enjoying his serene slumber when, all of a sudden, he awoke to find himself under the watchful gaze of Sunju, who was brimming with anticipation at his revival. However, Jangan felt feeble and struggled to pry open his heavy eyelids. In a weak voice, he inquired, "What's happened?" Sunju responded nonchalantly, admitting that Jangan had dozed off, and he had personally transported him to this location, even taking the liberty of skipping work for the day to be by his side. Summoning his strength to sit up, Jangan noticed a peculiar ribbon and a set of keys dangling from his arm. Perplexed, he turned to Sunju and inquired about this new adornment. Sunju, with a smirk, divulged that, in Jangan's slumber, he had been anointed as the leader of the 3rd platoon by the vice president. Jangan's eyes darted skeptically towards Sunju, prompting him to ask if this was an elaborate jest. Meanwhile, Guang and Yeom were nestled in the confines of their office. Yeom appeared somewhat troubled, his thoughts evidently preoccupied by a pressing matter. Guang, ever the gracious host, prepared tea, meticulously adding a precise 2 spoons each of tea, sugar, and milk to his cup. As he handed the steaming beverage to Yeom, he cautioned, "Watch out, it's piping hot." Before we continue, let's take a moment to shout out Dimitri Mohammed 174, who commented, "Make more best selection," on our Absorbing Monsters video. Thanks for commenting. Taking a sip, Yeom broached the topic that weighed on his mind. He queried, "What was your rationale behind appointing Jangan as the platoon leader?" Guang, unperturbed by the question, retorted with a question of his own, asking if Yeom found fault in the tea's flavor. Yeom clarified that he was referring to Jangan's sudden promotion and the potential ramifications. Guang explained, "The primary reason is that our previous leader proved to be weaker than I had anticipated, while Jangan, as it turns out, possesses a hidden strength we can harness when necessary." Yeom, however, delved deeper into his thoughts, suggesting that Jangan was more than a mere brawler. He was a trained fighter. Guang, with curiosity piqued, inquired what Yeom was alluding to. Yeom articulated his concerns, fearing that if Jangan's injuries fully healed, they might lose control over him. Guang, adopting a contemplative demeanor, responded that Yeom was ignorant of something crucial. Yeom, visibly intrigued, asked, "What don't I know?" Guang leaned in, his tone hushed, and revealed the company's policy. Only one of their employees could lead a platoon. He then encouraged Yeom to envision a scenario where 20 or 30 inmates attempted to overpower that lone employee. From a purely physical standpoint, it made perfect sense. However, within the confines of the prison, a peculiar phenomenon unfolds. Despite the simmering tensions and potential for violence, not a single inmate dares to step out of line and attack any of the prison employees. The question that perplexes many is why they hesitate to do so, especially when they possess the physical capability. Yeom, an observant inmate, believes there are 2 plausible explanations. Firstly, he posits that it's a case of inmates watching out for one another, a survival tactic in this harsh environment. They've learned that turning on their own kind only weakens their collective strength. Secondly, Yeom suggests that the fear of immediate retaliation plays a significant role. The inmates reckon that if they make a move, other employees can swiftly provide backup, leading to dire consequences. Even if an inmate were to muster the courage to challenge the authority, they understand that their rebellion would likely be short-lived. The formidable barricades and walls that encircle the facility serve as an impassable barrier. Any transgressor would be met with a harsh beating and confinement in the dreaded punishment room. However, Gwen believes there's a deeper psychological reason behind the inmate's reluctance to rebel. He points to the overwhelming fear and the sense of helplessness that tightly grip them, effectively keeping them in check. Gwen illustrates this with an analogy drawn from Southeast Asia, where young elephants are conditioned to fear humans through cruel methods. Despite growing into immensely powerful creatures capable of lethal force, these elephants never dare to harm a human. The deep-rooted fear remains. In Gwen's view, Jongin too has been conditioned in a similar manner, and his transformation requires a careful and considered approach. Yam questions the necessity of making Jongin the platoon leader. Guang asserts that it's not just a choice, but a requirement. This role is seen as a way to gradually acclimate Jongin to his new surroundings. Over time, it's hoped he will come to accept the prison as his home, much like the other inmates. As the two inmates sit on the floor near Jongin's bed, they muster the courage to apologize for their past transgressions against him. Jongin, informed that the previous platoon leader was sent to the ward after a fight, listens to their pleas. However, he cannot find it within himself to forgive them. Their faces fall, and they inquire about the reasons for his reluctance. Jongin calmly explains that he holds no grudges against them. He has not been in the prison long enough to bear any personal resentment. Their tension eases slightly upon hearing this revelation. Jongin, taking the role of a mentor, gestures to the inmates behind them and advises his two companions to seek forgiveness from their fellow inmates, who appear eager for retribution. Jongin lets out a yawn and suggests they settle their issues among themselves. He's going back to sleep. Those two keep pleading for help, but he turns away and dozes off. After waking up, he wonders if lying down like that ever brought him such joy. Then he gazes at the keys and armband and questions why they handed him these items. He recalls that they were about to make an example out of him when he left the punishment room. They wanted to salvage some reputation for that platoon leader after his last defeat. But then, he spoiled their plan by taking down that guy, and perhaps they tossed him in the ward because he was no longer of use after losing to that guy twice. He says he can grasp their plan up to this point, but why make him the platoon leader? Do they believe giving him this role will make him power-hungry like that guy? And in doing so, they can manipulate him? He smirks and remarks how amusing this is. Who do they think he is? He claims they haven't encountered anyone more intelligent than themselves, possibly because their surroundings are foolish, or they're unaware that others aren't as self-centered as they are. He decides to comply with their wishes for now, as it seems like the best course of action. At the Dizan Hotel, it's the grand opening of the casino and dining lounge. All the decorations are in place. Ti-moon and Choi are prepared to cut the ribbon. The announcer signals the ribbon-cutting ceremony, starts the countdown, and they cut the ribbon. The media captures the entire event. Choi shakes hands with Ti-moon, congratulates him on this momentous day, and says it was worth the wait. Ti-moon respectfully acknowledges Senator Choi's words, but privately criticizes him, thinking that if Choi hadn't vacillated between him and Guanho, he wouldn't have had to wait so long. The senator's secretary reminds him of his next appointment, and he departs, promising to meet again soon to discuss what couldn't be accomplished today. Ti-moon reciprocates the good wishes for the senator's trip. His secretary informs him that the senator has left, and he can relax now. Ti-moon worries, knowing the senator will call him for another meeting, and he instructs his secretary to prepare another box of apples for him. Then he invites everyone to go out for a meal. When asked where to eat, he suggests the same place with delicious dumplings, and he tells them they can order anything they desire as he's treating them. His hidden agenda is to gather all the food for himself, but Ti-moon is genuinely enjoying the moment today. His secretary pours him a drink and commends him on a job well done. What will happen next? Find out next time by staying tuned for our future recaps. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more great recaps.